we have further news coming out of the conflict and more reactions. The United Nations spokesman Stéphane Dujarric reiterated UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres' concerns over the rising tensions and military activity in Iran and the broader Middle East. Dujarric called for an immediate cessation of hostilities and a return to dialogue and diplomacy in line with the UN Charter. Dujarric also expressed concern over the growing chain of events, especially regarding France's readiness to assist Gulf nations targeted by Iranian retaliatory strikes. He stressed the need for de-escalation and emphasized that diplomacy must resume to avoid further conflict. Let's take a listen into the statements.
Over the past 48 hours or so, the Secretary General has been in touch with a number of regional leaders. Just a few minutes ago, he spoke by phone with His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, the Emir of the State of Qatar. The Secretary General reiterated his condemnation of the recent attacks against Qatar, which is in violation of the country's sovereignty and territorial integrity. He also reaffirmed Qatar's role as a strong and valued partner of the United Nations. The Secretary General and the Emir discussed the situation in the region and the urgent need to end the current military escalation and a return to dialogue in the interest of regionals.
Joining us in this discussion is Professor Veselin Popovsky, a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, joining us live from the Indian capital. As well, we have Rabinder Sachdev, an international affairs expert, joining us live from New Delhi. Also, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, this situation is developing extremely rapidly, so I ask to keep your answers brief. Professor Popovsky, first of all, starting with you, the Chinese Foreign Ministry has said, despite reports, it is not supporting the Iranian military in its campaign against Israel and the United States, its response, I should reiterate. Where do you think China stands and will continue to stand as this war continues to expand across the region?
That's a very good question. In fact, we can speculate whether this is true or not. We don't know, that's the answer, because Chinese may supply, as they did for Russia, and that's my reaction will be to compare with Russia. Officially, they never said they support Russia with any military support, with any weapons and equipment, but there are a lot of technologies that could be supplied and that could be used for military purposes. The same with Iran. They may say we support Iran with military means, with military support, but we know that China is very interested in a relationship with Iran, not least because it buys a lot of oil, it exports a lot of goods. China and Iran have good relationship as not those to be affected, and that's why China tried to say we support morally the Iranian regime, but not with military means. But nobody can be sure that behind that statement there are now some secret supplies by China to Iran. We will know that one day in the future. That's my opinion.
Rabinder Sachdev, coming to you next. Beijing and Tehran do have a strategic but not mutual alliance, of course. As this war continues disruption, both in the region and economically after the Strait of Hormuz, where do you see Beijing standing as this conflict goes forward?
I think Beijing will continue to stand the way it is right now, adopting a posture, a position which is very diplomatically nuanced, not giving away anything, generic kind of a statement, but yes, it would say that which it is right now, that what America is doing is against the rule of law or international norms, which it is definitely so. But, the US says we are not bound by it, we are creating a new set of rules for the world. That's what the US says. US agrees that it's not going according to what the world norms have been, and the US says, guys, this is the real world. Take it or leave it. This is my world now. So China is calling that out. China would, as our colleague Popovsky professor was talking about, would continue behind the screen, maybe assisting some, and maybe, yes, some components, some electronic components, which could go into some of the, the drones or the missiles program, etc., as China has been doing with Russia also. And even with Russia, it doesn't seem that China has given, military grade munitions, final products. But it does seem that they've been supplying several components which could have gone into the war machine manufacturing, the military industrial complex of Russia. Similarly, with Iran, they might start doing some of that at a little accelerated pace, but not too much and not overt, I would say. China would prefer to focus on its own situation, on its own growth, as well as its own global positioning, and let the Americans and West Asia fight it out amongst themselves. You know, their military stocks going down. By stocks, I mean,
Yes.
the stock levels going down, hurting each other, economic loss, military loss. China is happy for that, to let that go on happen without interfering itself in this.
And Professor Popovsky, just your brief comment. We've, of course, seen the United Nations Secretary General condemning the actions of both the United States, Israel, and, of course, Iran as well. As the potential for this war seems to be getting bigger and bigger by the day, is this once again highlighting that the United Nations as a body really is showing it's in need of reform?
Absolutely, you're absolutely right here, Thomas, that United Nations only make those declarations but nothing else. And that's why we have, for example, the Donald Trump and other players, the Board of Peace, and all other initiatives comes because of that lack of unity in the Security Council in the United Nations. We have the declarations, which are a good thing. Obviously, what the Secretary General and his representative Dujarric is saying is correct. These are violations of the Charter. They should be condemned. Everybody should do that. But we want to have a better United Nations. And for that matter, again, we need to have a different Security Council without the veto of great powers that constantly block and paralyze action, collective actions, to address exactly those types of situations. Imagine that there was no veto in the Security Council. In that scenario, Russia would have been condemned, and there will be globally imposed sanctions on Russia. And in the same way here, on Israel, there could have been globally mandated sanctions where everybody in the world cannot buy a single barrel of oil from Russia or anything from Israel. If this is the United Nations we need. Without the veto, the global sanctions on those regimes would have existed, like they did exist against Saddam Hussein when Iraq invaded Kuwait. We want the similar situation.
Okay, gentlemen, do stay with us. We have further updates coming out of the conflict, where Iran's ambassador to the UN, Amir Sehed Iravani, has accused the United States and Israel of deliberately targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure in Iran. Iravani condemned the recent strikes, describing them as blatant violations of international law. He further argued that the attacks are part of a broader pattern of aggression aimed at destabilizing the country. Iran is calling for international accountability, urging the UN Security Council to take immediate action against these actions, which Iravani labeled as war crimes. Let's take a listen into the statements.
The United States and the Israeli regime are deliberately targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure. The schools, hospitals, Red Crescent facilities, and residential buildings were attacked. On the first day of the aggression, the girls' school in Minab, a small town in Hormozgan province in southern Iran, was deliberately destroyed. As a result, 165 innocent schools girls were martyred. As I mentioned, we are not attacking the interests of our neighboring countries. We are defending ourselves. We are targeting the facilities and the bases and the assets of the United States in this country, in those countries which is out of the... As long as aggression continues, Iran will defend itself decisively and vetoed.
Meanwhile, the Israeli ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, has declared that Israel will do whatever necessary to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. Danon emphasized that Israel is conducting military strikes decisively, surgically, without apology. He outlined Israel's objectives, which include halting Iran's nuclear ambitions, dismantling ballistic missile capabilities, destroying Iran's navy, and crushing its proxy networks. Let's take a listen in to the Israeli ambassador.
Our objectives are clear. No nuclear weapon, no ballistic missile threat, destroy their navy, and crush the regime's proxy network. We are hitting decisively, surgically, without apology. So I said it very clearly that one of the goals of this joint operation is to make sure that they don't have nuclear capabilities to threaten the entire world. And we all know that those sites, unfortunately, after the summer, they continue to develop them and to rebuild them. So we will do whatever is necessary to make sure that
Rupinder Sachdev, I want to come to you on this. We, of course, there have had two conflicting statements from both the Iranian and the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, both of which are putting this defensive stance forward to the UN. What did you make of both the statements there from both Dani and Larijani at the UN there?
Sure, I'll come to that, but two quick points and then an answer will emerge automatically. You know, it is said that America is attacking Iran also because the Iranians say death to America and death to Israel, right? If you see the reasons why Trump says that, you know, Iran is our enemy, because they say death to America. Has anyone ever bothered to think, or has Trump bothered to think, why do Iranians say death to America? In 1953, a democratically elected government was disposed, the leader was put into a prison cell, and a puppet, the Shah, was put in power because the previous government was nationalizing the oil companies. The puppet Shah was put in power. The puppet Shah, he had his secret police, Savak, which was as cruel as anything. Sure, they were liberal in terms of, you know, maybe lifestyles, but the Shah was corrupt, exploiting his own people. His own people rose against him, deposed him. That's the Ayatollah 1979 revolution. And that revolution came with a cry, death to America, because America was responsible for instilling the Shah on the people of Iran. So when Iran says death to America, I find it logical. If my country were treated that way, I would say death to X, whoever did that to my country. That's one. So building the entire logic that Iran is the evil state because they say death to America leaves out the fact, why do they say death to America and death to Israel? And Israel is, of course, the footnote or with the US. So that's one contradiction I find. The second contradiction I find here, Israel has a nuclear bomb. Who gives you the right to say that the other country or some other country cannot have a nuclear bomb? These are the contradictions which we are seeing in the Middle East. Yeah, sure, much water has now, flown through whichever rivers, so things are further complicated. But if you keep aside the fluff and the shiff and the chaff and all, these are the two core things. Israel has nuclear weapons, it is known. How can Israel have nuclear weapon and then tell somebody else you cannot have nuclear weapon? We face the same in India. India, we developed a nuclear weapon, fine, we need it for our own security, why not? You can have it, but India cannot have it, and we were put under sanctions for so many years. So this whole notion of a UN exclusive club, which sets the rules of the games, is flawed. And yes, going back to the idea of the UN, absolutely, the UN is unfortunately totally helpless, and there can be no hope. I see no hope there.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
Indeed. Rupinder, Professor Popovsky, do stay with us. We have some breaking news coming in from the region. According to the US Geological